Okay, everyone, we're going to continue with Chapter 9, The Pilgrims Come to America. And yesterday we traveled from Georgia, um, and we went all the way up to New England, this is present day Massachusetts, and this is where the Pilgrims landed. So we went over some vocabulary, and one of those vocabulary words was a cargo ship. And I'm going to open up this chapter again, and we're going to start where we left off yesterday, showing that picture of the cargo ship and how that this was meant to carry goods, not people. And you had a partner chat and you discussed what problems could have come up because this ship was not made to carry people, it was made to carry goods. And some of you may have said, well, things could have not been very safe because it wasn't built for people. There also could have been the issue of running out of space. And that was one of the big things that was an issue with the Mayflower. They weren't just traveling for a few days, they were traveling for weeks and months. So we're going to read today about this long, hard journey, and then we're going to also watch a video about the Mayflower and are there descendants or are there people that are living today whose ancestors came over on the Mayflower. So we're going to begin at a long, hard journey. Altogether, 102 passengers and 30 sailors sailed on the Mayflower. There were also some hens, goats, and 2 dogs. The journey to America was difficult. The Mayflower was a cargo ship. It was not made to carry people. It was very crowded. The Pilgrims slept on the floor below the main deck. There was hardly any light and no fresh air. For the first month, the Mayflower sailed in good weather. After that, the ship and its passengers faced one storm after another. The wind howled and waves crashed on the deck. Most of the passengers became seasick. The Pilgrims were afraid that the ship would sink. The Pilgrims thought the terrible voyage would never end, but it finally did. Standing on the ship's deck that November morning, the Pilgrims saw a sandy beach lined with trees. This was Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Behind them was the cold, gray, late autumn ocean. The new decision. The Pilgrims were excited and afraid. They were very far from home. They were afraid that there might be wild animals. The Pilgrim leaders said they would have to live on the Mayflower until they found a good place to settle and build homes. Some of the passengers did not like this decision. They were tired of being crowded together in the damp, smelly ship. They wanted to go ashore. However, Pilgrim leaders knew they would have to stay together for safety. If they did not, they would not survive this new land. The Pilgrims knew that they needed rules and laws for good leaders to help them live together peacefully. Before the Pilgrims got off the ship, they wrote and signed a contract. So we talked yesterday about this vocabulary word, but a contract is when you make a written agreement before you begin something. So they are about to begin a colony and a new life. So they're going to write this agreement of how each other will be treated. And this contract could also include consequences if you do not follow these rules. For example, when you work in a group in my class, in the future, I would have you write a contract and agreeing on what are you going to do if you get behind, what are the consequences for not being on task, how you're going to treat each other. So that's just what the Pilgrims are doing here, is making that written contract or agreement. The Pilgrim leaders called their contract the Mayflower Compact. The compact said that all the passengers would work together to govern themselves in the new land. The Pilgrims agreed to vote. They agreed to majority rule. That means that Pilgrims agreed to do whatever the majority or most of the Pilgrims voted to do. They all promised to obey these rules after they left the ship. Starting a new life. After they signed the Mayflower Compact, the passengers were allowed to go ashore to Cape Cod. Everyone's legs were wobbly after being at sea for so long. Even though it had already snowed, the children ran out into the cold, sandy beach. The men searched for fresh water and dry firewood. They also explored the area. The women washed clothes. Soon the rocks and bushes were dotted with clothing spread out to dry. It took the Pilgrims almost a month to find a permanent place to settle. They finally decided on a spot on the other side of Massachusetts Bay from Cape Cod. There, the water was so deep The water was deep enough to anchor their ship. When they explored the land, they found Native American fields that had already been cleared for planting. They found freshwater streams and forests for timber. The Pilgrims named their new settlement Plymouth. So, we're going to watch a short film about the Pilgrims and about the difference that one pilgrim can make to even the people that we see on earth today. So, if some of you may have heard of the word ancestors, and your ancestors are people that have died years and years before you were born, maybe even before your parents are born. Your ancestors are your great great grandparents, or your great aunts or your great great uncles. So we're going to think about this while we watch this video. There are people today whose ancestors were the pilgrims. And so you're going to hear some big words like generations, descendants, ancestors. After this video is over, we're going to talk about what that means.
Somewhere far out on the North Atlantic, as the Mayflower lay ahull in a furious storm, an indentured servant named John Howland was hurled violently overboard when the ship rolled suddenly in the shifting gale. As he flew over the side, he grabbed blindly at a dangling halyard, and though he was carried far beneath the waves, somehow held on long enough for the crew to haul him back to safety. John Howland's survival was as fortuitous and random as his near-fatal plunge. In the New World, he would thrive, become a cornerstone of the colony, and marry a young woman named Elizabeth Tilley. She would bear him 10 children. 88 grandchildren, from whom over the next 4 centuries, an estimated 2 million Americans would descend, including Ralph Waldo Emerson, Joseph Smith, Franklin Roosevelt, Humphrey Bogart, Chevy Chase, and both George Bushes, father and son.
So, in that video, you heard the word generations and descendants. So, what that means is that pilgrim that fell overboard that ended up thriving in the colonies, well, he got married to a woman named Elizabeth Tilley. They have 10 children. Those 10 children get married and they end up having 88 grandchildren. So this is how generations work. You have a couple that gets married, that couple has kids, their kids have children, and then their kids have children, and you get generation after generation. So these children are descendants, and this married couple is descendants of this first married couple that we see right here. That's how generations work. So let's watch that video one more time to pick up those key details about the importance of one pilgrim.
Somewhere far out on the North Atlantic, as the Mayflower lay ahull in a furious storm, an indentured servant named John Howland was hurled violently overboard when the ship rolled suddenly in the shifting gale. As he flew over the side, he grabbed blindly at a dangling halyard, and though he was carried far beneath the waves, somehow held on long enough for the crew to haul him back to safety. John Howland's survival was as fortuitous and random as his near-fatal plunge. In the New World, he would thrive, become a cornerstone of the colony, and marry a young woman named Elizabeth Tilley. She would bear him 10 children, who would in turn produce 88 grandchildren, from whom over the next 4 centuries, an estimated 2 million Americans would descend, including Ralph Waldo Emerson, Joseph Smith, Franklin Roosevelt, Humphrey Bogart, Chevy Chase, and both George Bushes, father and son.
So, um, the point of that video is that we have people that are on our earth today that are descendants of people on the Mayflower. So, a quick recap. We talked about the challenges that the Mayflower might have faced, and a lot of our predictions were right. The Mayflower faced severe storms. It was dangerous for people to board the ship. There was very little space on the ship because it was a cargo ship. The video we watched, we saw that John Howland was accidentally thrown overboard. We're just skipping through this part. Okay. The question that you are going to write down in your writer's notebooks, and I'm going to have you pause so you can see the question. Um, so you can see the question as you write. What might have happened if John Howland, that man that fell overboard, had not survived the trip across the Atlantic Ocean? So think about when we talk about generations and the descendants that came from that family. What might have happened if he had not survived his trip across the Atlantic Ocean? Pause this video while you write, and then when everyone has a complete sentence, we'll unpause and see if our answers match up. Go ahead and pause. Okay, if you wrote something like many important Americans would not have been born, which would have an impact on the course of American history. If you had said something like there would have been generations and people that would not have been born in America, that would have been correct. A lot of the people that were listed changed the course of our history as well. So if you have anything about how there are generations of people that would not have been born, that would be a good answer. All right, this is going to conclude our lesson for today. We are going to move into the Thanksgiving in Plymouth when we meet again.